Hi everyone. Today I am painting these beautiful little cone flowers. They're my favorite color, of course, which is this Quin Magenta you see me use quite often. I'll be using that today. And we're just going to first do a little color swatch, which thank you so much for those of you ordering my kits. I hope they're providing you a lot of value and fun. I know I always loved seeing my teachers' work, and I remember in college going up to the front of the class afterwards and kind of looking at what she did and her brushstrokes, and that was always very useful for me. So I am putting these in, and I will include my swatch and then a page of the brushstrokes we're going to go over, and then the final original painting as well. That way you can purchase these. There's only one per tutorial, and I will put the name of the tutorial at the bottom and sign it and put the date. And then you can come back to the tutorial, warm up with the brushstroke drills or practices, exercise, and then you will also have the list of Winsor Newton colors. Then you can watch the video and give it a try yourself, and I'm hoping those are really helpful for you. I would have loved those from my professors and my teachers I've taken over the years. Today I'm using my Princeton 8 round, and these are my practice sheets. So these are a 140-pound cold press paper, although these are just student grade that I'm going to share the swatch with and the colors and the brush strokes, and then I will move to a more like an Arches 140-pound cold press. Let's go ahead and get started and create our swatch. This is that Quin Magenta, as you know, is my favorite. I just love this color. I'm also going to be mixing this with some purple and a little bit, and these cone flowers, they have in the middle this really beautiful dark brown, rich orange. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix burnt sienna and cad orange and get this beautiful color in the center. And then they've got these little tiny strands that come off of them, and I'll make those more of the cad orange. And I think those colors are going to go really beautifully together with the purple. Let's go ahead, and I've got my two containers of water, one to rinse, one to wash. So always making sure that after you wash your brush, you're really rinsing it good so that the color you were using doesn't carry over into the next color, because watercolors are so transparent that happens very easily. Here is the violet purple. There we go. This is the Quin Magenta. And I always use my olive green and my sap green to get that really pretty mix of a green. There we go. I'll be using that. And then let's see, what other color might we use? I'm going to also put on this swatch this burnt sienna. I think it's so pretty. And this is what we will use for the center of the flower. And then, like I said, I'm going to mix it with my cad orange. And I think those colors are really, really pretty together. So this is my color palette here. And of course, I'll be mixing some of them with this green. I might add in, I've shared this in the past, to get the darker colors in the leaves. What I'll do sometimes is I will take my green. So let's put that in here. And then what I'll do to create some cohesiveness in the painting is, for the darker green, I will add the color of the flower in it. And it will darken that green. So there you go. Here's a mix of that. Really beautiful. And it has that underlying, very subtle purple in it. And I think that really provides a beautiful mix of the greens and the purples and brings the whole painting together. So that's what I've done here, which actually is really similar to the gold green that I use quite often. I'll just put that on here so you can see. So it's very similar. What I did is I mixed the green and the purple. They're opposite, so they create this dark gray, dark brown colors. I might even use a touch of that in the middle of that cone too, because I really like the darkness there. So that's my color palette I'll be using today. And then let me just share with you some of the brush strokes that we'll be using for these cone flowers. And what I'm mostly going to be using is really for the leaves, for the petals, for everything is going to be this compound stroke. A compound stroke being, and this is in my free ebook. If you haven't picked that up yet, grab that. Just email me and I'll send that to you. It's a good reference for a lot of these brush strokes that I share with you a lot. So that compound stroke is where we're using the tip of our brush, applying very, very light pressure so we can get a thin line. You might want to practice these thin lines first, like that, just drawing some out, maybe going different directions. And then we're going to combine that with a little bit thicker stroke. I'm going to press down on my brush just a little bit, widen out the barrel, and just drag it across. That gives us a little bit thicker stroke. So the compound stroke is just going to be a combination of the two. So do a page of these thin lines, thin brush strokes. You're going to be holding your brush a little bit more upright so you can get that tip, and very, very light pressure, because the more you press down, the more it's going to broaden out the barrel of your brush and create a thicker stroke. Now I could even get thicker here, although I don't think I'm going to be using that for this particular painting. These will be the two. Practice these and then practice this with a little bit more pressure, and then we're going to combine them into a compound stroke. Let's do that. What we are going to be doing for the petals and the leaves is a very light pressure, gradually pressing down and then drawing back up. Press down, back up. And this is what I use for the majority of my petals and my leaves. Now, let's go ahead and practice a petal and a leaf. So your petals for this cone flower, the cone flower almost reminds me of a daisy, except the cone flower tends to, the petals don't stand upright. They're not coming out from the center. They're coming out from the center, but not horizontally, I guess. They are coming from the top of the cone flower and they're like falling down almost. They're really an interesting flower. So let's practice that petal shape. We're going to come from the middle of the cone, and I'm going to flatten my brush a bit, press down more, and then pick up a tiny bit, okay? So it's not quite this point, although you could do that. You could do that with the cone flower. You could make it a point if that's what you would like. I've seen them done both ways. I've also seen where the end of the flower is a little bit more rounded and blunt. So you know, practice, make your cone flower the way you want it to look. Pressing down and come out and pick up your brush, unless you want to make the tip of the petal thin like that, and that's perfectly fine too. This is your painting, so do what you like. Push down. So keeping in mind, the more you push down, the wider that petal stroke is going to be, that brush stroke is going to be. Now, the other thing I noticed on these cone flowers, and to backtrack just a second here, I would practice, as you watched, you saw me go from left to right. You're going to notice, especially if you're left-handed, going from right to left or left to right. Find what is most comfortable for you. Typically what I found is going left to right for most people, but it's up to you. So you don't have to follow exactly my direction. Find the direction that's most comfortable for you and use that. Now, these cone flowers, they have little buds, and a lot of times they are mostly green. I think what I'm going to do is they also have some, when they start to open up, the purple is coming out of the top of them, and then the green is coming from the base of them. So this is how we're going to do it. And I also noticed typically when I paint buds, it's like a little closed round ball. These I notice fan out. That's how I'm going to paint them here. And this is what they look like, just like this. Now what I want to do is, while that's wet, I want to go into it with my green, because I want to get that beautiful wet and wet blend. So I'm going to get some green paint, and then I'm going to go into this like so. They have a little bit of a round base, and they do have these, what they call sepals, coming out of them. So you can draw those if you want. I'm painting those with the very, very tip of my brush, very lightly. And then notice I'm also leaving a little bit of white space in there, so I didn't completely fill that in. I left some of that white space. There we go. The other thing is, these cone flowers do have a broader stem, a thicker stem. I'm going to use this medium brush stroke. We practice here for that stem. This can also be used for the leaves. Let's practice a leaf here. I've seen a couple different leaves. The ones I'm going to be doing today are going to be, let's just draw the stem here. And the leaves I'm going to create are going to be thinner and longer. So I'm point, press, like that. Point, press, like so. Again, practice. Some people find it easier to go from the top down, and you can certainly do that. I have found, for me, when I begin to paint the left side, I do tend to go from the top down. So point, press, and join the stem. Either way is perfectly fine, whatever's comfortable for you. That's very individual. And then there's my stem coming from this flower. Once this dries, we could go in. I'll see, you know, I don't like to get too nitpicky. We can add in some green here in between these little pieces on this bud starting to come out. Let's kind of play with that and wait and see what we find. So these leaves on the coneflower are very long and slender and flowy. Therefore, we're using that compound stroke, which is a combination of the thin stroke and the thick stroke, like you practiced here. There we go. Okay, so those are the basic brush strokes that we're using today. These are really the majority of the colors that we're using. For the cone in the middle, let me just demonstrate that here, how I paint them, is I'm going to go in with my burnt sienna. I might even go in with that green gold. It's pretty brown. Actually, I think that's what I'll use because it has that tinge of green in it. And the cone flower, what I love about them is they stand up quite high. It's like almost like a little knob on top of the flower. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to use the tip of my brush and just dot in, leaving white space. Don't create one big blob. So you want to make sure when you load your brush with paint and water, you can gently scrape a little bit off. If you feel like it's too wet, you can tap your paper towel and get that excess off. And we just want to very, very lightly, holding your brush straight up and down, go in and just tap in these little dots, leaving white space in here. Now, once you do that, go ahead and rinse and wash your brush. You can just tap it off on your paper towel. And I'm going to now go in with this beautiful orangey brown burnt sienna. I could even add a little bit more brown or orange, cat orange to it if I wanted. Let's do that and give it even more. So now it's got this really pretty chestnut orange brown color. And what I'm going to do is go in around the outside edge of that center I put in there. What I noticed on these cone flowers is the outer edge has this beautiful orange, almost glowing color to it. Now, I can touch these dark brown centers. Matter of fact, I want to do that a bit because it's going to get a beautiful blend between the brown and the oranges. Let's go ahead and touch in, and we're just going around the outside center. Matter of fact, let's do half with the blend of the brown and the cat orange, and then let's do the other side with just cat orange and see. I want to see which I like best. I'm almost thinking that bright orange might look really nice. So the other side, I'm going in with just the orange, and I'm tapping in, barely touching some of that first color I put in. There you go. So it's blending with that dark color, and it's still leaving the dark color in the very center, and then the outer edges are that beautiful kind of glowy orange. We could even go in with one more little layer of cad yellow in there. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to go into my cad yellow here. And let's go around the outer edge one more time, touching in. You can let it blend. Now I've got a little too much water than I really wanted there. So what I'm going to do, and this is that puddling and pulling. I've had several of you ask me, what's going on? I'm getting these blobs. That's typically what it's going to be from. You have too much water. If you feel you do have too much water, just take your brush and tap. See that? It will just a tiny bit, and that will make a difference. And then continue. Now I'm going to go in and probably lift some of that because I've got too much. I don't like that. So I'm going to dry my brush and pick some of that up. There we go. Now that's perfect. And then I'm going to go up, get a little bit more paint, yellow paint. If you see that happening in your paintings, just do what I just did. Go in, dry your brush off. You don't want to scrub it, but you can dab it. And then go in and just pick those little puddles up very lightly with the tip of your brush. I quite like this. I've got the dark in the center, then I went in with that orange, and then I went in with the cad yellow. So I really like that. I feel like it gives me that effect I was looking for, where it kind of looks like it's glowing. So with that, let's go ahead and paint a couple coneflowers here. These are the strokes. We've got the compound, the medium brush stroke, and the thin brush stroke, and we're using that compound stroke for both our petals and our leaves here, okay? And this is really just a tapping in very, very lightly, being careful how much paint and water is on your brush so that you don't get that little puddle that I got, and I had to go in and pick it up. Okay, here's my paper, and I'm going to do so I'm washing my brush. Make sure you've got clean water. Change your water throughout the day. I don't like having to go run and change my water constantly, so I like these really large mason jars that I can put water in to wash, and then my rinse jar is a little bit smaller, and that way I can maybe get away with changing it once a day. You want to make sure your brushes are very well washed again, so you don't carry over the color that you use if you went using brown and went into your cad yellow, you don't want to muddy up that cad yellow. I'm going to draw here, as far as a little bit of a composition, the rule of thirds. It's just what I tend to use. I'll have one kind of coming out this way to my right. Here's that little knob, and then we'll come out with the petals, and then we'll maybe do another one here. I like to have them facing different directions just for interest, and then maybe one here. So they're all kind of going different directions. And then once I get these in, I will go in and create a little bud somewhere, depending on how these fill the page. Okay, we first want to start with that little knob part, the middle part of the flower. I'm going to go into that brown I used, which is actually this dark green gold, and create the center of that. Just tapping in. Now, again, if you feel like you're getting these big puddles where you're tapping in these little dots, go in, tap your brush on the very tip, very lightly on your paper towel. And then go in and you'll see how much nicer that is. I'm just going into the very center of that. Let's move on. I was going to do that one, but let's move on and go ahead and finish this one. Now I'm going into, let's see, I think next I used this orange color, cad orange. So let's pick that up. I've actually got it here in my little palette. These I just got from Amazon. I like them because they fit in the palm of my hand. And then making sure you don't have too much water. See how that did that? That was probably a little too much on my paintbrush. And when I touch in on this again, we don't want it to create a big pool of water. I start tapping in. I'm just going to go around the dark brown that I already used here and create these little dots. There we go. Okay. Again, if you're getting too much water or you feel like those blobs, just go in with a dry brush and pick it up, soak it up. Now I'm going to go into my cad yellow. Let's get that on my brush here. Almost running out of that. And I'm going to go around the edge again. And it's going to blend with the other colors that I've got here. So just going around the edge, you can touch those other colors and let them blend a little. That's what's pretty about watercolors, is when they do that. So there you go. Isn't that beautiful? Look at that. It gives this real interest and depth to that little cone. And to me, it almost looks like that center is glowing almost. Before I move on to the next one, because as you know, I like working wet in wet, so I get those beautiful blends. I'm going to go in with that purpley color, my favorite color, the Quin Magenta. And I'm going to lighten it a bit, remembering that we can always go darker. With watercolors, you cannot go backwards. Add some water to that to get that light color. And then I'm going to point the tip of my brush towards the base of the petal, because that's where these cone flowers, the petals originate. Normally, we always go in a round circle because this cone flower, the anatomy of this cone flower, they kind of hang down from the base. I'm going to point all my petals towards the base, okay? Let's tap in, and I want to just barely tap into the edge of this middle part because I want that to spread a little. Tap in very gently, point of my brush, light pressure, and then press down and lift up. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at the yellow that got in there. It mixed and it spread. That's watercolors. That's what I love about watercolors and why I paint with watercolors. Same thing here. I'm pointing the tip of my brush in the direction I want that petal to go, okay? And the tip of my brush is pointed towards the base of this particular flower. I just barely, very light pressure. I touch the tip of my brush to that center, and then I begin to push down and come out. There we go. Isn't that gorgeous? These are such fun flowers. I think these are one of my favorite flowers to paint. And now I'm going to go around. Keep in mind the center may, let's go ahead and do the center. I do that quite often to kind of as a guide, will be just a little bit bigger because of course it's in front and you're seeing the entire petal. These are a little bit to the side. Point, press, widening out your barrel of your brush, and come down. And I'm going to make it hang down just a tiny bit because it's in the front. Go into my paint again. Notice the color here of my paint. It's that tea consistency, and it's a light value, meaning it has more water than pigment. I'm going to touch in, start pressing, and lift up. Now, if you decide you want that point at the tip of yours, you can certainly do this. This is your flower. How you would do that, instead of pressing down and lifting up, you would just begin lifting your brush till it gets to that point, and then pick up the brush. I'm stopping with my brush spread out and just picking it up. That's why I'm getting that round edge. Let's do another one here. Now, really, you want to keep working. I'm talking and working, so this might be drawing a little. Press like that. And these are so cute. These are such cute flowers. I love the way they hang. Now, once this dries a little bit, I'm going to go in over these and create some more little petals hanging down. I want to go in on the side here And we're not going to see this entire petal. We're just going to see it coming down a little bit in the back. So point, and I'm going to do that. We're kind of tucking it behind there. Point, arch it up like a little hill, and come down. Okay? You could even do another one right there if you like. I sometimes do that. Okay? Now once this dries, I'll go in and add a few more light petals, or maybe we'll see some of the petals from the back. I feel like I want to add one right here for sure, and maybe one here. Let's move on to our next one. We're going to start again with the center of the flower, the cone part. And this can be a little bit darker value, so a little bit more paint than water, but it's still the tea consistency. And let's just go in and create those little dots. Now, if the dots again are creating a giant puddle, just tap your brush off. There you go. I'm leaving some white space in between them for interest. I'm going to go in, rinse my brush, scrape it lightly, just dab off, and now I'm going to go into that orange color that we've been using, which I need to put some new on here because I've gotten a little bit of brown in there. That's okay. Let's go around. So here's that example of just gently scraping off. I barely have to touch it, and you see all that water come off. That's what we want. And then we're going to go in around, touching a little bit to the brown, but not making a big blobby mess. There we go. Now I'm going to go around that with the cad yellow. Rinse my brush, scrape it, tap it, and now let's go into that yellow, cad yellow. These are all Winsor Newton paints, by the way. And I'll list all of these in my description for you, as I always do. If you think you have too much water, just tap it. I'm good. And start going around that outer edge. You want it to blend, but you don't want to create that big puddle. There you go. Beautiful. Now let's work into that while it's still wet. I'm going to go in and grab that Quin Magenta and create that beautiful light value. Once again, go in with the point of my brush, barely touching into the center, just enough to get it to spread. Point, press, pull out, and kind of curve around because, of course, these petals are hanging. Grab a little bit more of that Quin Magenta, point, press, and curve around, and then I'm picking up at the end of my brush stroke. Do a couple more. I'm going to go in the center. There we go. And just keep going around that flower. Now I worked a little quicker here with the wet and wet, so that's why I'm getting a little bit more of that beautiful blending. Point, press, point, press. Okay, like that. Aren't those lovely? They're so pretty. Now I'm going to go in after and create a couple petals here because I think for me that's a little bit too much white space in between them. I want them to be a little fuller. So you can put a little more of that Quin Magenta on your brush, tap in. Now you're not going to get that spread because the yellow center is dry. Press and lift. Isn't that pretty? If you watched my tutorial on the transparent flowers, this is a little bit of that technique. Point, press. There you go. I just love that look. I'm going to do the same thing here once that dries. We've got one more flower here. It gives us the opportunity to practice that center. We go in, we pick up that darker green or brown, and just touch in, dabbing in. Remember, if you need to, you can blot the tip of your brush, just like that. Now I'll pick up the next color, which is that cad orange. Let's grab it from my palette here. I've had a number of you too ask me about my palette, how I set it up. I will be doing a tutorial on that if that interests you. I actually am trying to use up some of my paints so that I can start using a new palette that I have I really like, and it travels well. And I'm just going to follow the color wheel going from warm to cool as far as how I put my paints in there. I'll be working on that probably in maybe sometime this week. Okay, now I'm going around that dark brown with just dotting in the orange. Very, very light touch here with the tip of my brush. You want it to spread a little, that's perfectly fine. That's the beauty we love of watercolors. And then around that with our cad yellow. So let's pick a little bit of that up. Oops, sorry about that. Hit my camera. There we go. Again, tap off if you feel you need to. And just go around the edge. This is our last one. Holding, when you're using the tip of your brush like that, hold your brush straight up and down. I tend to turn mine a little just so I don't block your view. But in order to get that tip, hold your brush straight up and down, because the more you angle your brush, you're going to start using the side of the brush and it's going to be a wider brush stroke. So to get that tip, very, very lightly hold your paintbrush up and down and just use that tip. There we go. Okay, now we'll go into this one last time with the Quin Magenta, that light value, and I'm going in with the tip pointed towards the base of the cone, barely tapping in and pulling out, just like that. I would vary the sizes of these two. I'm going to try and make the petals on this one a little bit smaller. Point. Okay, just for interest. Point. There we go. We could even create a couple petals that are darker value to create that interest. Point. Like that. Point. There we go. Not pretty. And then you can add in that one in the back. It's just like a little hill there. Like so. Okay. Now while this is dry, I'm going to go ahead and go into that and create those other petals that I wanted to do. Point. Press. Just like that. Point, press, and then maybe add in just that little hill in the back to represent. I tried to give you ideas of the shape. That's why I said like a little hill, because for me, my mind knows what that looks like. So if I say a little mountain or a little hill in the back, my mind knows how to tell my hand to paint that, and I can replicate that. I'm going to go in on this one and just do that a little bit more in the background here. There we go. Once this dries, I will then go into this piece as well. So there we've got our flowers. Now let's start working on the stems. The cone flowers do have a little bit thicker stalk. So I'm going to use a little bit heavier pressure than I might on a lot of other stems that are quite a bit thinner. And let's just go in, making sure that your stem, wherever direction you're pointing it to, so I'm pointing it to the base of these petals. I want to make sure though that the direction the stem is going to make sense and look right because it's pointing towards the center of the cone. Okay, so here we go, like that. Just thickening that up a bit, okay? This one, I'm making sure that the angle of that stem is pointing towards the center of the cone. Otherwise, it's going to look wonky. And practice this brush stroke to get this width. Practice it first. So when you go to do it, you have that muscle memory and your hand knows already what you need to do. Again here, I'm going to come out from the center of the flower, but it's still going in the direction towards the center of that cone. Like this. Okay. And this original you will get in that kit as well, by the way. You get this original. I'm going to write the name of the tutorial. I'll date it. I'll sign it. You'll get these brush strokes, and you will also get, and I will label everything. I will label these with what brush strokes. I will label all the Winsor Newton colors for you. Okay, so the last thing I see I want to do here is maybe go in and put one more little petal here. Okay, and maybe we'll add a little bud somewhere. I think I might like to have a bud come out here just so we can play with that because I think they're kind of fun to paint. And we want to add in some of these leaves. So picking up some of my paint, that consistency of tea, and we're going to, again, the leaves on this fun little flower, cone flower, are very flowy, very long, very slender. Point, press, and as you're picking up, just have fun with it. Have fun with the leaf. Point, press, like that. And we'll go in, and I've talked to you a lot about creating that push and pull, that interest, that depth. We do that by using darker values, lighter values. So these are a little bit lighter values. So they're going to look a little bit farther away once I add a darker value, which is more paint, less water. Point, press. There you go. Let's do one right here. Point, press, like that. And then let's create our little bud here. Washing my brush, tapping it off on my paper towel. And let's pick up some more of that Quin Magenta that we already have mixed. And we're going to create that little bud. Now I've got these three directions I'm really happy with. So, whoops. Let's pick that up. So we've got this one coming out this direction. Your eye goes here. And then your eye gets pulled back in through there and down through here. Also with these leaves kind of coming out different directions, it's guiding your eye around. This little bud, I'm going to create right here. And again, I noticed in the buds, the petals kind of fan out. So that's what I'm going to do. Like this. As they're getting ready to drop down. And while that's wet, because I want to get this blend, I'm going to go in with my green and let that blend in there and create this little bud. We can also create those little sepals, the little frilly things that come out of the bottom, and our stem. There we go. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go in and add a little bit more to that, darken some of that up, like this. There we go. Just to add some interest. Okay. Now, the last thing I think I'll do here, aside from add one more petal here, picking up the last bit of that Quin Magenta, and I'm going to go in and add this one last petal here. Point, press, pick up. I'm going to add a couple very light value and maybe one darker value leaf to get some of that interest. Let's go in and just use this water, very watered down. I've got a lot of water here, which is going to create a very light value. And if you like, play with on your practice sheet with creating darker and lighter values so you get the hang of how much water and how much paint to create the different values, because that's what's going to create interest in your painting. So let's just come out here, press down. Now see, because that is a very light value, it's pushed into the background. I'm going to do another one here with that light value, like so. There you go. And then let's do one really dark one here so you can get a feel for the darker value. More paint versus water. So I've got a pretty dark value there. Now here we go. Point, press, like that. See how that popped out? It really gave you this feeling of dimension now in your painting. You've got this leaf right in front. You've got these very light values in the background, and it creates this interest for your eye. It doesn't look so flat. There you go. I hope you have fun with this painting. Practice these brush strokes, practice getting to know how much paint, how much water, so you can create these different values. And I will get this listed on Etsy right away for you. When I've done the little workshops here, the 2 to 4 hour workshops, this is always the first flower I teach them. And to get rid, a couple of you said you don't like all the white space around it. You can go in, and I've had in my classes, they have done little splatters. Let me just show you what that would look like. I used to use a lot of splatters, and now I've kind of veered away from that. I don't know why, it just kind of happened. It can be really pretty though, and it can kind of add some detail. So let me just show you what that looks like. You're just going to tap the top of your brush. Now, you have to have a little bit of a watery consistency so that it comes off of the brush a little bit more than I would, I'm teaching you to put on your brush for brush strokes. So here we go. See? That's pretty. It kind of creates a little bit of interest. You could do the green color, you could do that Quin Magenta color, and there you go. Let me go ahead and sign this. And this will be our cone flower. And the date today, this is 5/2023. And there you go. Let me show you one more time, and I will label all of these with the brush strokes, the colors, and this will be in there for you to purchase. And just let me know if you have any questions. Have fun with your paintings. Most of all, I'm not one, to tell you rules or how things should look. These are your flowers. Yes, you want to learn these brush strokes and colors and things like that, but these are your flowers. So make them any color you want, any size you want. I would vary the sizes so that it gives a little bit of interest, and find your unique style for these. All right, everybody, thank you so much. Don't forget that free ebook I have for you that has a reminder of these brush strokes. And I will link all the supplies in the description. And have a good day. I'll see you soon.